Okay. Hello again. This is your final lesson for chapter 3, so be excited. A couple of things. So I wanted to talk logistics really quick. Just a quick reminder, because I know, so I'm actually not officially checking email, but I had to do a couple of things just last minute. So do not try to email me to ask me questions because I'm not going to email you back. I'm not even actually checking my email starting next week. So please, guys, if you need assistance, don't email me because I can't obviously help you because I'm not there. But a couple of the things I've seen crop up, and I'm going to sort of deal with this now and then never again. So again, if you want to watch these videos ahead of time or you want to rewatch them, they are all available on YouTube. What you need to do is go to YouTube and you're going to search for Amy Brissett. And all of the lessons for the rest of the semester are up there. They're all named exactly the same name as your note paper. So for example, for today's lesson, lesson 2.3-2D, on YouTube under Amy Brissett, you're going to see lesson 2.3-2D. So it should be have exactly the same name. Really easy access to everybody. Yeah, so go to YouTube, search Amy Brissett, and then look for the lesson you want. And again, they're all up there. They're not going anywhere. I'm not taking them down. So they're going to be here for the rest of the semester. And again, all of the lessons from here until the end of the semester are available. So the very last lesson for you. Oh, also, they're not in order, so I do apologize for that. I'm not really sure why they're not in order, but they're not. The last lesson that you guys will have for this semester is lesson 3.5-3. I think it's B, actually. So that should be the last lesson that you actually have on YouTube. So last lesson. Yeah. And then finally, the next sort of logistics thing that I'm seeing is it seems like a lot of people have been complaining about the chapter 2 test, and that was supposed to be curved, and so I don't know if Mr. Lynch just didn't get around to it before he left or what happened, but I'm going to go ahead and just exempt it for everybody. So as of now, I still have Atlas, access to Atlas, but just so you know, again, I'm not even going to have access to Atlas once the permanent maternity leave sub is in the classroom. So once that happens, I will no longer have access to your grades. So again, I am the wrong person to approach if you have questions about grades, because it's not even technically supposed to be my classroom at this point. But right now I do. I've gotten a bunch of questions about chapter 2 tests, so I'm just going to go ahead and exempt it. So it's not going to hurt anybody. If it super helped your grade, then by all means talk to the permanent sub that comes in and see what they're willing to do for you. But again, guys, if you have questions about grades, either talk to the sub, or if you're kind of worried because you don't know who's in there permanently, talk to your counselor, talk to somebody, but I can't help you, okay? So for now, I'm exempting the chapter 2 test for everybody. All of my videos are available on YouTube. I'm not really going to be responding to emails, so you need to find somebody else to kind of get help from all this, okay? So moving on, let's actually start this lesson, which should be pretty short and hopefully pretty easy. So the last thing, and this is sort of just a random bringing this together, the last thing we're going to talk about is you can actually write the equation of a regression line. So y hat equals a plus bx. You can do that from a bunch of random information. And so I'm going to show you sort of the formula for slope, and then I'm going to show you sort of what we do with it. So this guy this formula is available to you on the AP test. So they actually give you this formula. But slope of your regression line is actually equal to R. It's equal to correlation times the standard deviation of y over the standard deviation of x. And you don't use this a ton, but where this comes into play is there's almost always a multiple choice question that is going to give you R, give you standard deviation of y, give you standard deviation of x, and then ask you to find the slope or ask you to find the equation. But first, we have a formula for slope. We don't really have a formula for y-intercept. So let's talk about what we do to find the y-intercept. Okay. So the way that this works goes something like this. So let's say I have a scatter plot with a positive, fairly strong linear relationship. Here's sort of the idea behind it. So let's talk real life and actual example. So let's say that you take a person who has an average height. What would you expect to be true about their shoe size? Well, if they have an average height, you would sort of expect them to also have an average shoe size, or think of it this way. If you take a short person, what would you expect for their shoe size to be? Would you expect them to have ginormous feet if they're short? No, that'd be comical. You would probably mock them, which would be really rude, but you would. So when you have a short person, you would expect their feet to also be small. So you would expect a short person to have a small shoe size. You would therefore also expect an average person to have an average shoe size. And so what we sort of are assuming, and it is definitely assumption, it's not perfect fact, we're assuming that if x is an average value, that it's going to match with the average value for y. So that's the idea behind this. So in theory, x bar, so the mean of all of the x's, comma y bar, the mean of all of the y's, should be a point on the regression line. Because we expect something, whatever we're looking at, with an average x to also have an average y. So again, if we take a human being and they have an average height, we expect them to have an average shoe size. I'll just stop there. Well, you got the idea, hopefully. So first of all, we have a formula for slope. And then once we find the slope, we can actually find the y-intercept. And all of this is going to make a lot more sense when we look at an example, but just go with me here so that you have instructions for what to do. So once you have the slope, assuming you've already plugged in the stuff that you need to find slope, so you know B. To find y-intercept, you are actually just going to plug in the point x bar comma y bar, the average value for the x's and the average value for the y's, for x and y hat. And then you're going to solve for A. And again, this is going to make a ton more sense, which we actually see an example. It's super easy, frankly. Mathy, admittedly, but. So again, you're starting with the equation y hat equals a plus bx. You already know B. So what you're going to do is you're going to plug in y bar, and you're going to plug in x bar. Again, you should already know this section. You should know this, so you're just trying to figure out what A is. So let's actually look at an example, and as you're going to see, you're going to be given everything you need. They're going to give you correlation, they're going to give you standard deviation of x, they're going to give you standard deviation of y, and they're also going to give you the mean of x and the mean of y. So let's go ahead and look at an example and put all this together, and then we're pretty much done, actually. So let's do it. Okay. So it says the mean height of married American women in their early 20s is 64.5 inches with a standard deviation of 2.5 inches. The mean height of married men the same age is 68.5 inches with a standard deviation of 2.7 inches. The correlation between the heights of men and women is about 0.5. Okay? So R equals 0.5. So first it says find the equation of the least squares regression line for predicting a husband's height from his wife's height. Show your work. Okay? So first of all, let's write down all of the stuff they know, or because you were given a lot of information. So let's actually kind of assign some variables here. So first of all, we need to decide, in this case we're talking about husbands and wives' heights. So we need to decide which one is X, which one is Y. Is the wife the X? Is the husband the X? What's going on? So reading this question, it says that we are predicting a husband's height from his wife's height. And because the husband's height is the thing being predicted, the husbands are going to be the Y variable and the X's are going to be the wife. So let's talk about what we have. So let's start with the wives first. Do we know the mean height of all of the wives? Well, yes, we do. They tell us it is 64.5 inches. Okay. They also tell us the standard deviation for the wives. They tell us it's 2.5 inches. Cool. Okay, well, do we know the mean of the husbands? Yes, we do. It's 68.5 inches. And do we know the standard deviation for the husbands? Again, yes, we do. It is 2.7 inches. So they listed off 4 numbers in the very beginning of this problem, and now we know what these numbers are. And if you notice, hey, I got standard deviation of X and Y, that probably is going to play a part in my formula for slope. And it looks like the only other thing I need for slope is R, which do they give us R? Yes, they do. So they have given us 5 different values that we are going to use. And this is pretty much how all of these problems go. You're given every piece of this puzzle, you're just supposed to plug it in. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start with the slope. And again, remember, my ultimate goal is I'm looking for a final equation, y hat equals a plus bx. Okay? So let's start with b. Let's start with my slope. According to the equation up top, it should be equal to r times the standard deviation of y over the standard deviation of x. So, okay, let's plug in what we got. I know r is 0.5. I know the standard deviation of y is 2.5. And I know the standard deviation of x is 2.7. Okay, so I'm going to just take all of that. I'm going to plug that into my calculator. And it looks like I'm going to find that my slope is 2.5 divided by 2.7 and then times 0.5. So it's going to end up being 0.54. So now I have found my slope. Awesome. Okay. Well, next I want to find my y-intercept. So now here's where we're going to sort of obey what step 2 said to do, and it said to plug in x bar comma y bar for x and y hat. So I am going to, instead of y hat, plug in y bar, which is 68.5. I don't know what a is, that's what I'm trying to solve for. B, I just found out, was 0.54, and then instead of x, I'm going to plug in x bar, which is 64.5. Okay, so from here, I'm going to simplify. I'm going to multiply 0.54 times 64.5, and I'm going to solve for a. Okay, so I should end up with 33.7. Should be my value for a. Okay. So again, all I did is I already had b, I just solved for it, and then instead of x and y hat, I plugged in y bar and I plugged in x bar. Okay? And this is what you're going to do every time. So finally, they want an ultimate equation for the regression line. So again, you have a choice. You could do y hat equals a is 33.7, and then b is 0.54. X, I could write this equation and then I could define my variables. So x equals wife's height and y hat equals predicted husband's height. Or I guess you could say husband's predicted height. That would make a little more sense. Or instead of y hat, you could write husband's height with a little hat on it and then instead of X, you could put wife's height. Either way, totally up to you. But this is it, guys. This is your final answer. All right? So as you can see in this problem, everything was given to you. And usually, as I said, this ends up being a multiple choice question on the AP exam. And on the multiple choice question, it's going to look just like this. They're going to give you all of this information, and they'll ask you either for the entire equation, or oftentimes they'll just ask you for the slope. Okay? So that's kind of how this goes. So let's move on to question B. And for this, I'd like you actually to pause the video, try it, and you're going to want to discuss this with your group because this one's kind of tricky, and then come back and check what your answer is. Okay? So it says, suppose the height of a randomly selected wife was 1 standard deviation below average. Predict the height of her husband without using the regression equation. Okay? So go ahead and take a couple minutes, pause this, try to come up with an answer. Okay? And by the way, most years, I usually only get like 3 or 4 kids per class who actually get this. So if you do get this, you should feel really good. Okay? So pause this, try for an answer, and then start again when you are ready. Okay, so here's the deal. You're not allowed to use this equation. Whoopsie. Yeah, that's like a heart rate thing. EKG. ECG, I think. Anyway, so you're not allowed to use this equation. No go. Instead, you're supposed to kind of use what I told you up top about average height and average shoe size, which is if somebody has an average X, you expect them also to have an average Y. So in this case, what we're assuming, and I know there's lots of examples to the contrary, but we're assuming if the wife is 1 standard deviation below average, we're going to assume her husband is also 1 standard deviation below average. So that's sort of the idea behind this. So if the wife's height, and you don't necessarily have to write this, I'm just writing this for your edification so that you know. So if the wife's height is 1 standard deviation below average, we expect the husband's height to also be 1 standard deviation below average. Okay. So if the wife's height is 1 standard deviation below average, then the husband's height should also be 1 standard deviation below average. So all right, well, what's the average height for a male? Well, do we know that? Yes, we do. It's this guy. Do we know the standard deviation for a male, for the husband's heights? Yes, we do. So what we're assuming is this dude's height, so husband's height, we're assuming that it is 1 standard deviation below average. So we're assuming we're going to take the average height for males and just subtract 1 standard deviation from it. So 68.5 is the average height for males, and I'm going to subtract 1 standard deviation, which is 2.7 inches. So 68.5 minus 2.7 inches is 65.8 inches. And so that's how I can estimate the husband's height from the wife's height. And same logic goes, hey, if the wife is 2 standard deviations above average, then I would expect her husband to also be 2 standard deviations above average. Now again, I know especially in this example, that's not necessarily true. Short people marry tall people marry short people all the time. But in general, that's what we kind of have to assume. Okay, this question right here, part B, is a little more rare. So you wouldn't necessarily see a question like this on an AP test, but you would certainly see question A. Like, that's coming for you. Okay? All right, folks, so that is the end of material for chapter 3. really, other than that, for this section, it's just linear regression. You've kind of had an idea of how scatter plots work, how to describe them, how to make them. You've seen where correlation comes from. And you've now messed with writing an equation for linear regression. So again, just a reminder, if you want to watch these videos again to help you review for the test, at the end of the chapter, please feel free to do so. Go to YouTube, search my name, Amy Bresette, and then all of the lessons for this entire chapter, and actually all of the chapters for the rest of the year, are on there. Also, and I wrote this in sub notes, so hopefully your sub knows this, but for the rest of the semester, you're only going to be taking multiple choice tests. You are not going to be doing the free response tests at all. And so instead, you're going to have the free response tests as a review for the multiple choice tests. And yeah, so you're just going to be doing the individual multiple choice tests. They are all curved. I have a curved guide at the bottom of each test key that your sub should have. So they all should be curved. You shouldn't have kind of the debacle that evidently was Chapter 2. And again, I am exempting all of your Chapter 2 tests because it seems like they were not curved when they were supposed to be. And then finally, last minute reminder, if you have questions about grades, guys, I am not the person to go to because I'm not physically there, and I will, again, once I have a permanent maternity leave sub, I will no longer have access to Atlas, okay? So that being said, guys, good luck. Check this stuff out on YouTube. And again, Khan Academy has good stuff for AP Stats. His entire unit on regression looks pretty close to what we do. So by all means, check it out. If these videos aren't really doing it for you, check those out. Use the internet, guys. This is a huge resource for you here. Okay. Did I want to say anything else? I don't think so. Oh, yeah, last thing. Your multiple choice tests. Guys, I know this is sort of a high stress situation for you, and I know that there's temptation to cheat. Just know that if you take a picture of the multiple choice questions, these are actual AP test questions that are not supposed to leave the classroom. So if you end up taking pictures of this test, if for some reason the sub is not watching you, which they absolutely should be, but just in case, and you send them out in any sort of capacity, if you get caught, all of the AP tests in every single subject for all of Edison High School are voided this year. Not to mention Edison gets in a ton of trouble, not to mention you get in a ton of trouble, and you could risk things like college acceptance, and that's not over-exaggeration. Like if they find out you cheated on a college board exam or released questions from a college board exam, schools can absolutely take back your acceptance. So this is not a joke. This is not something light. Do not take pictures of this exam. Do not take this exam out of the classroom. If you've already done it, you best not tell anybody, and you better cover that stuff now, because if they find you, like, not good things will happen, okay? So, on that happy note, good luck with regression, guys. I know if this unit was sort of, remember, this is sort of the medium unit. The next unit is easy peasy lemon squeezy. The last unit is going to punch you in the face. So, but again, that test is curved. It's very heavily curved. I think like a 48% is actually a B on that test or something silly. So really don't worry about that stuff. Talk to the sub, guys, if you have questions. All right. Have a lovely day. Good luck studying. Peace out.